Let's dive into these chilling ghost encounters. Story 1. I talked to angels, apparently. I moved into my current home in 2016, knowing it was haunted, or had been haunted. My friend and neighbor Chuck rented my home 20 plus years ago with a few other guys. He said that the house was heavily haunted, with a very angry ghost when he lived here. To give some context, Chuck is one of the most straight-laced men I've ever known. A conservative Republican who owns a multi-million-dollar electrical company. He doesn't goof around, so when he says something, I believe him. He said pictures would fly off the wall, doors would slam for no reason, that kind of stuff. He said it happened so much that an exorcist was finally called in to end it all. I asked Chuck if the exorcism worked, and he said he didn't stick around to find out. He moved out right after. When I moved in, I could feel the energy in the house, especially on the far back closet wall of my bedroom. The right side of that wall, to be specific. I bought sage to try to cleanse the house and burned it while walking around, encouraging the ghost to leave. It didn't work. A few months after moving in, my son and his family came for a visit. One evening, I went out to the sunroom to say goodnight. My son was walking around, quietly strumming his guitar. He gestured to the wall that is shared with my bedroom, the closet wall. "Someone killed himself over there," he said, pointing to that creepy corner. I stopped in my tracks. "What?" I asked. I had never mentioned the haunting to him. "Yeah," he said. "Someone hung himself over there." Holy crap. He felt the energy too. Truth be told, the ghost had been pretty quiet, aside from my dogs barking at the closet wall for no reason, and the clothes rack falling off that wall several times. We finally had to hang the rack from the ceiling with heavy chains, exactly where he supposedly hung himself. A couple of years ago, I was going to bed as usual. I plugged my phone into the outlet, where I always do, turned and took 2 steps away. I heard a loud bam behind me, like a hammer had hit the wall or someone had whacked the wall really hard with a broomstick. My phone flew 3 feet to the right, the cord flew 3 feet to the left, and the charging block fell straight to the floor. The outlet wasn't black from a short, no puff of smoke, nothing. And the TV that uses that outlet was still on and working. The ghost was pissed about something, apparently. After that incident, I didn't really feel the energy anymore and thought maybe he had left. Nothing weird happened, but the dog still occasionally growled at the closet. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, I was standing in the kitchen looking in the fridge. Behind me was a metal pegboard that I hang all of my pots and pans on, along with some other kitchen accessories. For no reason, the strainer hanging on that board jostled back and forth. I turned around to look at it, and jokingly said out loud, "I know you're in here." Haha. I went about my day and didn't think of it again. That evening, I was in bed watching the TV when my husband started playing loud music in his computer in the living room. It played for a few seconds, then I realized it wasn't him. It was the Alexa next to my bed that had come on. I thought maybe I had set the alarm to PM instead of AM, so I said, "Echo, stop." But it didn't stop, it got louder. Weird, right? So I listened a few seconds more and realized I recognized the song but couldn't remember the name. I muted the TV to hear it better. It was playing "She Talks to Angels" by the Black Crowes, and it was not only playing on the speaker by my bed, it was playing on every speaker in the house. Story 2. My great-grandfather. When I was 22, I spent my last semester of college living with my great-aunt. This was in the early 1990s. I had gone through a pretty bad breakup the semester before, and she offered me a place to stay. She was a spinster who lived alone in the house that was originally my great-grandparents'. My great-grandmother passed away when I was an infant, but my great-grandfather died when I was 14, so I remembered him quite well. I was given my great-grandparents' bedroom to stay in. One morning I woke up quite early. It was just breaking dawn. My great-grandfather's apparition was in the doorway. He looked as he did when I was young teen. He always wore a charcoal gray sweater over his work shirt and slacks. I was not alarmed or scared. It was quite peaceful, calming. This was the only experience I have had. I'm now in my 50s. This has always stayed with me. I remember telling my great-aunt about it later that day, and she seemed bothered that it had never happened for her. Not sure if bothered is quite the right word. I just think she would have liked to have it happen for her. Story 3. Coincidence or ghost? Unexplainable story about my sister's house. This is a very weird story, but I'm curious to get others' opinions. My sister moved into an old farm home. It is somewhat secluded, and on lots of land. I believe it was built initially in the 1800s. First of all, her son, who is now 4, has claimed to see a child in the house, and I think he also has seen a man. From what I understand, he would say the kid was nice, and as far as I know, wasn't afraid of what he saw. I've had no other supernatural experiences I've questioned before these. I never really thought deep into paranormal. Last summer, however, I was experiencing CPTSD, and I remember feeling especially on edge at her house, but I could never explain it. The last Mother's Day, I remember going to her house, and although it's a little blurry now, having a panic attack and leaving because I felt something unexplainable was so off. I remember leaving that day and stopping in the town nearby, and they told me the electricity had gone out. This sent me into a further panic as I began connecting paranormal experiences I've heard about affecting electricity. At that point, my family already thought I was nuts from my other personal challenges, that I recall not ever dare suggesting paranormal as an explanation out loud. I recall feeling a sense of calm come over me, and I remember for some reason I knew the car was going to shut off, and I took the nearest on-ramp to a gas station where the car then shut off. It wouldn't come back on. I called my parents crying, and I remember feeling even crazier when they came to get me, and the car started completely fine. I dismissed myself as crazy for months until they had a litter of kittens that was born from a stray. They ended up naming one Bill Johnson, and all of the other kittens had only first names. I remember thinking it was a weird but funny name. A while later, she told me that her husband had found out from someone in town that there was a guy with that same name who used to come farm the land by their house. My sister also found out recently while talking to neighbors. She had actually been to a yard sale at the same guy's house where she purchased a painting that is now hanging in her home. What do ghost enthusiasts or skeptics think here? Story 4. Something runs upstairs every night. When I was younger, I was friends with this guy who lived in a fairly big, old house. I occasionally went round to hang out, but I'll never forget the time I stayed there overnight. We were playing games on the Xbox in his room, and it was quite late at night. I've always been into paranormal stuff, so naturally I was asking about his old house as I know he has seen and heard things there. Anyway, he was telling me stories about his house, and he said he always keeps his door closed at night because he doesn't like the sounds he hears. I asked what he meant, and he told me that almost every night at around midnight or just after, he hears footsteps coming up the stairs, and once it reaches the top, he hears more, but this time running directly at his room. His bedroom is at the end of the landing upstairs. He told me that he has never been able to keep the door open to find out what it is. I didn't believe this completely and thought it might be a joke, so he said try and keep the door open and see if you can handle it. So I challenged myself to that and decided I'd keep the door open to find out. It got later through the night and eventually it reached midnight. A few minutes passed and I began to hear those footsteps up the stairs. At first, I did think it could have been a family member, but I then realized they'd all gone to bed and all of the lights were off outside of the bedroom. I listened as it got closer, and it was like someone just walking up the stairs like normal, except when it reached the top, there was nothing there. I could see the stairs from the bedroom. Moments later, I hear footsteps gradually running towards the bedroom, but I panicked and shut the door as fast as I could. I couldn't bear to see what could happen. To this day, years after, I still wonder what it could have been and why almost every night that happened. I wish I could go back and do it again as I think I could handle it a lot better. I'll never stop thinking about that experience. Story 5. Life Between Unseen World, from my story. After that night, I continuously had trouble sleeping for a few months. The voice would come to me between 2:30 and 3 a.m. The next thing I saw was people always saying that there's a God guiding our thoughts and actions. It turned out to be true. I saw many underworld gods, more than 100. Gods like Qixia, Tianyang, Tianyin, and many more. It's like we are constantly going through cycles of good and bad days, or years. These gods record everything we do each day, and if we do evil, they punish us with bad luck, either that day or that year. One of them explained to me that every human must go through this cycle until the day we die. After that, I woke up, it was already 5:30 a.m. I felt really curious about why he told me all this. I didn't understand it at the time. But 1 year later, I suddenly became interested in Chinese astrology, especially Ziwei Dushu and Bazi reading. I picked it up very quickly and understood the meanings well. Many years ago, even when I watched videos or read books, I didn't understand anything. But now, somehow, I suddenly get it. Of course, I'm not as accurate as the famous feng shui masters. What's funny is, I don't even understand Chinese, but somehow, I can still understand the meanings behind it all. Story 6. I am talking to someone deceased. So basically, the love of my life passed away 2 days ago, and I was really close with her. And our relationship could never be remade or recreated anyways. Yesterday, her old account started sending emojis replying to stuff on Insta, and I got confused and I didn't think it was her, but I asked her. Questions only she would know, and she knew all of them. She even knew how she died. I cried OFC and told her I love her, and the next day she is texting me on her main account. Now you might think someone's on her phone, but nope. I asked her family. They even turned the phone off, but it turned. Story 7. My house is haunted. This is what always happens. Hello. My name is Diana, and I'm from Guatemala. I don't speak English, but I use a translator to adapt and tell you what I experience every day. And I always live with ghosts, just like my family. My house has existed for many years. It has survived an earthquake and strong tremors. My great-grandfather built it many years ago, and the house was left to my grandmother. Now I live here with my cousins, grandparents, my parents, and my brother. Paranormal things have happened to each of us, every day, especially to my brother and my dad. In the early mornings, you can often hear someone washing clothes and children playing marbles in the hallway. It's become normal for me to see and hear these things. Things like this happen often, and my aunt passed away in this very house. Sometimes I feel like she's coming to visit us, but when I get scared, I realize it's not her. One day my brother told us that while he was sleeping, something or someone tried to open the door and was knocking loudly. But luckily, my brother had the door locked. That same night, someone knocked on my dad's bedroom window. I've woken up with scratches and bruises and unexplained places I couldn't have given myself in my sleep. But if anything happens, I'll record it right away, smiley face. Story 8. I saw my dead great-great-grandfather. When I was young, about 4 or 5 in age, my parents moved to a house in Malagash, Nova Scotia. My parents had a tendency of moving when I was younger, looking for cheaper, easier houses to live in so they could raise me and my brother. It was a good-sized house for 2 adults and 2 kids. It had 2 floors and a basement. Big enough kitchen for everyone to eat in, large living room for guest activities, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and the basement was turned into an at-home gym. The house is roughly 150-ish years old. It was an old farmhouse owned by my great-great-grandparents from my mother's side of the family. They lived there for, I want to say, 70 to 80 years. My great-great-grandparents both lived long lives. Many years went by and eventually my parents got the house. I'm not sure if it was inheritance or sold from another family member. The house was in rough shape. Many interior and exterior issues that had to be fixed for 2 parents to raise their kids in. My oldest memory of the house is being stuck behind a baby gate with my 2 to 3-year-old brother as my parents and other people renovated the kitchen. Now, me being a kid, I never knew what was going on around me. I was curious about everything, but I can barely remember much from living there, except being smacked with a Wii remote by my brother while playing with sports. One memory I have, however, and I still remember this to this day, was seeing a tall man in my doorway. I was watching TV in my bed until I saw a dark figure. It was a larger man, almost looked like he was 6 inches 6 to 6'8", wearing work boots that went up to his knees. The doorway was an 80-inch tall door, as all other doorways in the house were, and the figure stood from bottom to top of the door. Mind you, this was on Christmas Eve, so me being a kid, I assumed it was Santa Claus, but I didn't say anything. I just glanced at my doorway as I was watching TV, looked back at the TV, looked at the doorway, and then no one was there. Years gone by, about 4 or 5 years, and we moved out of the house. My parents said it was for my mom to be closer to her new job, and my dad was offered to work for the new school board instead of the one near Malagash. We moved to a small duplex, and it was a weird change, going from a 2-floor, 1-basement house to a smaller 2-floor duplex too. Some adjusting, but we managed. Many years go by and we've moved from one location to the next. My parents had a hard time living in some places. Until we moved in with my grandmother, on my dad's side after my grandfather passed away. We're still in this house today. A little bit after we moved in, my grandparents on my mom's side bought a piece of land. This has become our cottage spot where my family, my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, and family friends all have a camper on. Kind of like a home away from home, as my family calls it. One night my parents got onto the topic of the old Malagash house. As Hilly said earlier, my great-great-grandparents lived in that home. My great-great-grandfather passed away in that house. He had an oddly peaceful death. He was falling ill but still managed to keep moving like he was not sick. One day, as he was at the dining room table, drinking a cup of tea, he rested his head on the table. As soon as he rested his head down, he passed away. An almost sudden but easy way for him to go out. As my family was talking about the old owners, my great-great-grandparents, they described my great-grandfather as a hard-working man. He was a very tall, pretty big guy, and he was known for wearing work boots, usually boots that went up to his knees. It wasn't until I heard that description that I had a flashback to that old memory, the memory of a man standing in the doorway. A man, as I seen, was a tall, large man wearing knee-high work boots. I'm still freaked out by this experience, as I never believed in ghosts until hearing my great-great-grandfather's description. Part of me wants to revisit the house and have fun with ghost hunting equipment. Whether you think I could have seen something else or it was my parents looking in at me, I still believe I saw him. As later finding out, my parents believed that house in Malagash was haunted due to strange and haunting occurrences that have happened. But those are stories for another day. My aunt's haunted basement ghost. One day I had went over to my aunt's house to sleep because I had been out drinking all night the night before. It was about 10 a.m. when I got there. She had given me the okay to sleep in the basement. So I went down to lay on her futon type of couch. I tossed and I turned for what felt like 20 minutes. I come to check the time and it had suddenly been 9 p.m. The basement had been very dim, just enough to make out the figures of the things in the basement because the light that was on didn't work too good. I laid there with my eyes closed, trying to fall back asleep, could not sleep, so I sat up and turned on her game that was in the basement. Tried to play for maybe 10 minutes, then laid back down to get some sleep. Same thing, tossed and turned for what felt like another 10 to 20 minutes, then checked the time and it was suddenly 2 a.m. I then got up again and texted my cousin because he was supposed to pick me up. I got up to watch for him through the basement window. The window was about a half a foot or a foot higher than me. I jumped a couple times to look out and got an eerie feeling, so I grabbed a stool to stand on. Suddenly, after a couple seconds of looking out the window, there was hard scratching on the concrete wall just an inch or two from my ear. I slowly turned my head, and nothing was there. So I decided to go to the other window, on the other side of the basement. Usually my aunt's furnace made 2 banging sounds every 30 minutes, so I was okay hearing that, but after the 2 bangs there were 4 fast bangs right after. I looked towards the stairs on my way over, and something had peeked its head out from behind them. I told myself, that's okay, is nothing I haven't experienced before. But then as I got to the other side of the stairs near the other window, I looked and there was 7 to 8 foot tall shadow-like figure standing there just looking at me. Again, I told myself, as long as you're not scared, it won't bother you. So I went and stood looking out the window. Then after I got down and ran up the stairs and outside as fast as I could into the street. Thankfully, my cousin had just started to pull up. I then started to tell him what happened as soon as I got in. That's the closest anything has gotten to me other than my encounter with the little person, and I seriously believe it was some kind of demon that had evil intentions. Story 10. Haunted Airbnb? Last year in late August, me, 17, and a couple of my buddies were staying in an Airbnb in New Hampshire. When we first got into the Airbnb, we found a visitor log or whatever you want to call it. In the book, it said the house was haunted. Me being the very skeptical person I am, me and my friends brushed it off and made jokes about it the entire trip. After a long day of running around, my friends wanted to go out late and throw a football around. I stayed back in the house and hopped on the PlayStation we brought. I vividly remember seeing a bedroom door to my left that was completely closed. As I am playing a game, I look to my left and see the door slowly opening. There were no windows or anything open. I have never ran that fast in my life to get out of somewhere. Say what you want, but I know what I saw. Story 11. Translucent animals in the road at night while driving? My mom and her friend Heather were driving Monday night, and they both saw this white translucent cat run across the road. My mom goes, "Did you just see that cat?" And Heather says she's pretty sure she could see through it. Then later down that same road, my mom saw a big deer run out right in front of the car. She screamed and grabbed the dash, but Heather just kept driving because she didn't even see it. And it disappeared. My mom said that when you're emotional, you're more susceptible to ghost encounters because the wall between the worlds is thinner or whatever, and she had a horrible emotion weekend, so it makes sense. I've never experienced something like that before. I just wanted to share in case anyone had similar experiences so I can talk to her about them. Story 12. Did the ghost miss me? One night, I had went to go house sit while my mom was away, and this had been the first time in a couple years I'd been there. Lots of paranormal would happen, and I had even had a spirit attached to me before then. But the first night there, I had a dream that someone had been knocking at the door of the bedroom I was in, so I said, "Come in." It was a family member asking to use my phone and saying dinner was ready. I told him yes and that I'd be right out. He then left, and about a couple seconds later, I heard knocking and said, "Come in." Again the knocking, and me replying over and over until I realized the knocking was coming from under the bed. Then this demonic-looking hand came out with a voice saying, "Levi, we've been waiting for you to come back for a while now." Just a bad dream? Or was it the old spirit that used to bug me when I lived there? Story 13. Guardian armored majestic knight by my bed every night. Greetings. I witnessed this unreal and very beautiful great paranormal experience back in 1988-1989. I was 5 years old, my brother was 4, and at first it started with me only. I used to suddenly wake up around midnight, and I clearly saw translucent majestic knight in shining armor and legendary long sword-wearing helmet that is similar kinda to samurai. I didn't even know that. Back then, the first encounter, I was very scared, and I didn't make. One night, me and my bro woke up, both of us saw him clear as day, and we are in our 40s. We still talk about him, and clearly we both remember even the details of his armor helmet sword and how tall and great he looked. But we couldn't see a face, not even his eyes, his helmet looked. I can't seem to put it in words, just great, like he was very exalted and somehow divine. Absolutely great presence and peaceful vibes, and we still remember that. Never scared us, never been afraid, on the contrary. It was very peaceful experience, embedded deeply and with full details in our minds. Clear as day, no doubt about that. I still seem to think deeply about that experience all the time. Kinda relates to armor of the divine, the helmet of salvation and the sword of the spirit, offensively and defensively protect our minds. Perhaps he saved us from imminent demonic attack. He was a divine guardian. I am certain of that. You guys experienced anything similar? Feel free to share. Story 14. Interesting ghost stories. I remember when I was 7 years old, we lived in a small town called Musina, South Africa. This little small town was famous for its big copper mines, and it is allegedly the area of a lost African civilization who settled in Dai Mapungubwe copies. Now, at the time, we lived in a small little house on the same yard as my grandpa. One evening at about 8 or 9 in the evening, I remembered walking from our small living room where the TV was to our kitchen, so go and pour me some water, do drink. Now, in the kitchen, there was a window looking out into the backyard. Well, it was obviously pitch black dark, and you could see anything outside. As I opened the fridge, I glanced to the window and was stunned when I saw this pitch black, half-human, half-pig face with wild hair looking at me and saying something, but I couldn't make out what it said. This person, or whatever it was, spoke in an African language, and it had white eyes. I dropped the water bottle and the ground. It scared the living out of me. I'm sure till today it was a ghost I saw, and it was trying to communicate with me. Later on, I found out that there were old graves in our backyard. I am 38 years old and remember it like it was yesterday. Story 15. Something definitely didn't want me there. My family is Buddhist and we have this monastery that we always go to in LA. The head monk there was pretty chill until everyone found out that he was involved in some shady stuff. They found his burner account on Facebook and there were a lot of weird posts. He got kicked out and the monastery was unoccupied for a while. It was dead dry, and here and there, people would come over to maintain the place. That one evening about a year ago, my aunt asked me to come and help her clean and tidy up the place because a monk from out of town is visiting and staying there. We arrived, and it was pretty dark already. It was a decent compound, and I started heading to the main building that the old monk stayed. My aunt was behind unloading some cleaning supplies. There was only 2 of us in the whole compound, and the parking lot is a little far from the building. The structure of the building is if you go in from the main entrance, there is a hall room with a Buddha statue that faces you. On the right side, there is a restroom, a laundry room, a storage room, and 2 bedrooms. I started turning on the light in the hall and everything felt normal. Then I turned on the laundry light, restroom light, and storage light. Still nothing. I was just tired because I just got out of work and wanted to go home. Then I went into the first bedroom and I felt something was off. I turned on the light and saw a bunch of stuffs on the ground. It suddenly got cold. I got the chills. It was an uneasy, heavy feeling, and I felt threatened. Like whatever being in that room did not want me there. I got scared a little bit and went into the second bedroom, same feeling, but it was worse. I got goosebumps and my instinct was just, leave, now. I ran out of the room and saw my aunt in the hall. I told her that I don't like being in those bedrooms, and she told me not to go in there again. I always wonder what was in that room, like I did not see anything at all. Just got that uneasy and unwanted feeling. What would happen if I even stayed a little bit longer in that room? After all of that, my aunt asked me to get a tray for the flowers, and I went to this little outdoor storage alone. It was so dark and I did not feel anything at all. So I know that I was not imagining. Funny thing is, ever since I was a kid, I was always told to stay near the Buddha statue because it would protect me. What was I supposed to do in this case because it happened right next to a Buddha statue? All I know is I don't want to get that feeling ever again. Story 16. Realizing I saw a spirit 20 years after it happened. If you're looking for scary, this isn't really it. More sweet, in my opinion, smiley face. For a long time I've always said that one of my first memories was my 3rd birthday party. It was such a unique and fun party, it just stuck in my head. I remember asking my mom for Santa to bring me a pony. I was born in July, LOL. On my birthday, she made exactly that happen. I remember so vividly, a Santa in a Hawaiian shirt and shorts, bringing me my first horse named Topaz. It was obviously very exciting, and I remember everyone's faces around me. There was a mix of jealousy, excitement, confusion, on all the kids' faces, but the person I remember the most was my grandma's face. I remember looking over to her and she just had pure happiness in her eyes. She just seemed so happy to see me as elated as I was. She held her hands together up to her chest, neck tilted a little bit, and just stood with admiration. I remember shooting her the biggest smile, then promptly asking for help to get on my new pony. A year ago today, I was talking to my mom about this very fond memory I have of her mother, who has since passed away. As soon as I got to the part in the story where I say, and then I looked over to Grandma Henry, she gave me a confused look. Your Grandma Henry passed away right after you turned 1. I was shocked. I have always held this memory very close to my heart. It has never wavered, details have never changed, and I see it crystal clear. I knew my grandma passed away when I was very young, but I guess I always assumed it was shortly after this birthday. This is just your reminder that your loved ones will always be there, whether you know it or not. Thank you, Grandma Henry, for coming to see me. 17. My grandmother. For as long as I can remember, my mother has always told me that my grandmother was something. She always told me that she acted too strange when she and my aunts were little. She once told me that when she was pregnant with me, she and one of my aunts, who at the time my mother was about 29 and my aunt was 17/18, lived with my grandmother and took care of her, etc. But strange things started happening, my mother told me. She told me that one time while she was sleeping, she woke up because she felt a presence. She says she turned around and saw my grandmother standing next to her, staring at her and smiling in a creepy way. Another time she told me that they were eating with my aunt at night and that my grandmother was sleeping, so my aunt went to the bathroom. That to go to the bathroom you had to go through my grandmother's room, but for this my aunt went to the bathroom. 2 seconds later my mother heard my aunt calling her, screaming. My mother went to see what was happening and said that my aunt was looking towards my grandmother's room. My mother told me that when she looked out she saw my grandmother on top of her closet, which was tall enough to climb on it, and even more so for a person his age, and who was swaying and laughing like crazy. One of those nights my aunt had to go give my grandmother some medicine. My mother was not there, but my aunt told her. He says that when he was about to give her the medicine, my grandmother was lying down and covered up to her head. My aunt asked her what was wrong, but she didn't answer. To the second he said, "Mom, what's wrong with you?" And he says that whoever was under the sheet responded, "I'm not your mom." My aunt got scared and left her there. And so my aunt and my mother almost always had similar things happen with my grandmother. But I clarify that she did black magic. That explains a lot of things. But she didn't have any illness like schizophrenia or anything like that. I bet everyone would think that. He did witchcraft, macumbas, black magic, pacts, and so on. That's why he always acted like that. Nowadays she is fine. I think so, because I haven't seen her in a long time. Because there was a time when I was already present that she returned to that phase, but I can tell you that in another story. And despite everything, she is my grandmother and I love her, but I don't know, what do you think? Story 18. The girl in the black dress. I still remember the first time I saw her. It was a Saturday morning. My sister, with whom I shared a room, was running in around. I had been sleeping until she woke me up. I remember hearing her footsteps and rolling over to watch her grab some toys and run back out of the door. The sun painting our room a golden yellow. A few more minutes, I thought to myself, as I went to roll back over. As I did, I saw her out of the corner of my eye, standing beside me, looking down at me. Though her face I couldn't make out. I saw that she was pale. She had long black hair and a black dress with red. I remember sitting up and looking around thinking, who or what was that? On our second encounter, it was well past midnight. I remember laying in bed, struggling to sleep. The light from the living room illuminated the foot of my bed. I remember laying on my side, staring at the wall, trying my best to fall asleep when I saw her again out of the corner of my eye. The same pale girl standing at the foot of my bed, blocking some of the soft light that trickled in this time. I could see her well. Her long black hair, her pale face and dark eyes, her black dress with red detailing. Oddly enough, I did not feel scared. In fact, the next thing I remember was being woken up by my grandparents for breakfast. My third time seeing her was almost a year later. Deep down, of course, I never forgot her. From my bed, I could see through our living room to the front door. It was late. Once more. Another round of insomnia, something I never quite grew out of. I saw her again standing in the doorway which separated the kitchen and living room by the front door. She stood there looking through at me, and I felt like she knew I was looking back. She was the same as I always saw her, pale face, black and red dress, long black hair, but she looked, or well, felt sad. One thing that had changed was she wasn't alone this time. She held the hand of a tall, dark shadow. I remember how inky black it looked. The only feature I was able to make out was a cowboy hat on his head. I fell asleep not too long after, and I remember feeling sad. I remember warm tears rolling down my face before finally falling asleep. The next morning when our grandparents woke us up, our aunt was at our home. She asked us to sit down and said she had something to tell us. My brother and I looked at each other, and it was as if both of us had already knew what was coming. We asked her if our father had passed away. I remember the shocked look on their faces and them asking how we knew. I couldn't tell you how my brother knew. Maybe he had felt that same sadness that night. Maybe he saw her as well, but for me it was her, like she was an omen, a harbinger maybe? Every time I saw her, something bad would happen. Fights, car accidents, death, or in a shocking twist. My car malfunctioning and frying the computer. Also funny enough, at midnight. I don't know who or what she was. I don't think I will ever truly know. But she is the reason I have such a deep fascination with the paranormal, with all things dark, cryptic, and creepy. But anyway, my childhood home has always been haunted, and I have more stories to tell if anyone is interested. Story 19. A discussion I had with my resident today shook me up. I work in an assisted living for those with dementia. Today I was sitting with a resident in her room who is very early into her dementia. She said she wanted to talk to me about a few things. So I agreed, and she began to tell a story of her past husbands. She started off the story by saying, "My last husband is dead." Sort of. I asked what she meant, but she said she had to tell the whole story. Very long story short, she tells me of her past with abusive or cheating husbands. She provided great detail, lots confirmed through internet searches and pictures. The story was over 40 minutes long. She finally starts to talk about her last husband. She said he had cancer and in a time of depression, shot his face off but survived. Months later it took his life. She said that they buried him, had him declared dead, all that. But hours after the funeral, she has woken up by knocks on the house. She says it was her husband, covered in dirt. She rushed him inside and she was freaking out. She said he just went to the basement, where he had previously shot himself. She began telling her family members, but they didn't believe her. So she started bringing him food and water. This went on for months until her daughter said, "That's enough, you're going to an assisted living." However, once the daughter moved into her mother's house, she saw her dad. Out of fear, she locked the basement up and told her mom she was right and that they should never discuss it. The resident then began tearing up, thinking about how her husband was likely gone now, locked alone in the basement. This freaked me the hell out. But also she has early dementia, so maybe it's not true. So I asked her clarifying questions. Do you think he's alive? Does anyone else know? Why didn't you call the police? How would the cemetery not know? She answered all the questions by saying that he was, in fact, dead, but his very physical and visible ghost-like body is there. Before anyone questions this, because of her dementia, she is not usually like this. She is very early into her dementia and has never told lies or delusions. She started the story saying he was kind of dead, and then proceeded to tell a 40-minute detailed and evidence story in a timeline fashion. I have a master's in psych, and perhaps there is, but I have never heard of stories like this so detailed and real to be mental illness. I have told this story way shorter than it was. The emotions, evidence, her story, all felt incredibly real. It also felt so evil. I am an atheist, but had such an incredible bodily reaction to this story that I said a prayer. It felt haunting. Maybe people will try to downplay this or explain it away. But I am an atheist, and really not a believer in the supernatural. But for some reason, this has me completely shaken up. I've seen it all the past 6 years working here. I know this resident, and I know her story was real. Story 20. Has anyone else seen a glowing white figure with no face? When I was a child, I don't remember the exact age, but I think I was around 7. I had a very strange experience. I was in my bedroom looking for a toy to take to school when I glanced toward the corner of my closet. That's when I saw a glowing white figure. It had no face, no clothes, and its entire body looked like it was made of light, kind of a silver-white glow. I could clearly see its head and hands, and it was just standing there, staring at me. I froze in fear. When I looked away for a second and looked back, it had disappeared. A few years later, I had another strange encounter. I was in the living room watching TV. There was a large glass door that opened to our garden, and while watching, I suddenly felt like I needed to look outside. That's when I saw a human-like figure quickly moving past the door. I panicked and ran to tell my parents. It was around 8 p.m. My dad thought we might be getting robbed, so he grabbed his gun and went outside. My mom asked me what the person looked like, and I said white. What I meant was, it was glowing white, like light, not a person wearing white clothes. When she asked me to describe the face, I told her it didn't have one. and that it was floating as it passed by the window. Years after that, I was sleeping at my aunt's house, in my cousin's room. That room was directly across from my aunt's. She told my parents that one night she woke up and saw around 3 of those same glowing, white, faceless figures floating outside the room I was sleeping in. When my parents heard this, they immediately remembered what I had told them years before. I haven't seen them since, but I've always wondered what they were. I've found a few similar stories online, and I've seen people talk about shadow people, but these were the opposite. Not dark, but bright and glowing. Has anyone else ever seen something like this? Story 21. Old house activity. So when I was young, about 10 in 1988, we lived in an old house built around 1880. It was one of those Queenslander-type houses, huge veranda out the front and on the side. Large main lounge room too. The lounge room would give me the creeps, the feeling of always being watched. Also shadows every now and then. I also had constant nightmares there. It consisted of an old woman screaming and something to do with a tree out the front. The screaming was absolutely terrifying. These nightmares weren't just every now and then, they were constant. The thing that really bothered me was usually after midnight, not always on time. I'd hear a thud on the veranda, ridiculous cause it was screened in. I'd then hear the sound of a chain dragging and running, like a human loudly running away. This happened every night, without fail, and scared the shit out of me. I told my mom, but she avoided the subject. When we left there, it was like a dream come true. Story 22. Should we have allowed her to read the property? So this was a few long years ago. My mother was on our property. My dad, I believe, was learning heavy equipment. My mother at the time was into spiritual properties, learned everything about them. She was talking to this medium, who said she charges people to reveal secrets about properties' pasts. But when she came to our property, my mother said she felt uneasy. Even offered to tell my mother what the history of the property is. My mother turned her down. Her conclusion was that if she offered to do a reading for free, something was wrong with this property. After she turned her down, they left. Shortly after that, I got back from elementary school and decided to walk in our field as a shortcut up to my home. Walking through it, I found a cow corpse. I was dumb and brought up its severed head to the house. My dad saw me holding each halves of the literal head and told me to let go of them. I don't know where the photo is, but apparently the skull was cut so cleanly down the middle, it looked like a lightsaber basically cut it. The corpse was also split in half the same way. Asked a neighbor to deal with it. He used it for art, but he said the spinal cord was cut perfectly in half. Weird things have happened on this property. And plus we're in the middle of Okanogan County, so that's just weirder. Story 23. Is this a ghost encounter? I thought I saw a deer behind the rocks on my way home in the forest. I reached out my arm to stop my mom from walking towards it, because we had the dog with us, but she could not see anything. So we kept on walking, and then I saw a metal table, the type you put newspaper at the bottom. It was rusty, so I put it back where I found it, which also was the place I thought I saw a deer. I looked down and I saw teeth in the dirt, so I picked it up and it was a piece of a deer's jawbone. And it was only later that I thought about what if what I thought I saw and what I found is connected. They are digging up the forest, separating the stones from the dirt, so the pile of stones are man-made. People like to dump stuff there, and that's how the table ended up there. By the way, I took the bone with me, IWAS, thinking about giving it to a friend. Story 24. Growing up in a haunted house. I had lots of paranormal experiences growing up, so I thought, why not share it on this sub-smiley face? My house became haunted ever since it was built, so it wasn't the house, it was the land. It was a pretty big property, around 8 canals, 40,000 square feet, and around it was just fields. In the radius of around 1 kilometer, there was no population. There were around 6 to 7 people who worked on our property full-time to maintain it, and every single one of them had a story to tell. So, when the house was being built, constructions workers used to see this weird animal who looked like a rabbit. When they went to catch it, it would turn into a rapper and fly away in air, and would just vanish. Yes, a rapper. That animal would suddenly turn into an object and vanish. This story has been told to me by 3 different people over the years. When me and my siblings were little, my mother used to hear jingling of anklets at night. My father was always away on business trips, and helpers were not allowed inside the residential property, so we used to be alone. There was no one inside the house, and the jingling sounds and sounds of people running around in the lounge were always heard. Thing took a major turn when we grew older. One time a maid suddenly came over to my mother and asked her, "Yes, ma'am, what is it?" My mother gave her a confused look and she told, "You called for me." My mother never did. She told her, "You were standing on the stairs staring at me, and when I asked, 'Do you want anything, ma'am?' you just gestured me with your hand to come to you." I completed my work and came. When my mother told her that I didn't call you, I was in my room the whole time, her face literally turned pale skull. Another time, I was alone in my home and I heard a door opening and then closing. Imagine those doors that have door closer on them and are made of wood. They make a big sound when they are closed. When I heard it, I went downstairs to check and the door was closed. And everything was normal. I thought maybe it's air, which is sus because air can't open a wooden door. But that was just me coping. I closed all the windows shut so there is no air coming from anywhere, and went up. The moment I was on my last step, I again heard the sound of door opening and then closing, loudly crying. Now I was beginning to realize this is some jinn type shit. I just stood there for like a minute but again went downstairs anyway. I was in the middle of the stairs, and I saw that the door was just hanging in between. Like not closed but not open. That was impossible as the door had a door closer on it and who the heck would have opened it? All the doors and windows were locked. No human and no air. I just stood there a bit frozen and taken aback. I looked at the door for like 5 seconds and then boom, it closed itself with a bang! Like a person just shut the door hard. I just ran upstairs and increased the volume of TV so I won't hear this shit any longer. One time, I was awoken by a large banging sound, like someone is banging the door very hard. The sound was coming from the lounge, which was a bit far from my room. It was around 2 to 3 a.m. maybe. I went to check on it. I was surprised that why isn't anyone else woken up, as the sound was very loud, but I didn't give it much thought. When I reached the door, I was so shocked. The sound was coming from behind the door, as if someone was banging on it, but as loud as the sound was, the door was not vibrating. It was still. Again, I stood there thinking, what the hell is happening? I was convinced it was thief or something, so I peeked through the window that was beside the door, and there was no one there. The sound was still coming, but there was no one behind the door. It was a very strange experience. But as I told that we were experiencing these things since childhood, I just turned and went back to my room to sleep skull and crossbones. There was this one thing that used to happen regularly. Whenever one of us was sleeping alone in a room at night, they used to pull the toe of our foot. I swear to God, this happened too many times I lost count. Another thing that usually happened to my mother was that she was slapped on her leg, loudly crying, even if we were in the room. She would wake up and angrily ask, "Did it just slapped me?" I will sit there cluelessly, and then we will both give each other that knowing look and go back to our work. And the most strange part is that I used to get dreams about strange type of darkness lingering in our house. One would say that my mind was just playing games on me, but hear me out. One time I had a dream that there were a bunch of children, B/W, the ages of 3 to 6, sitting in our lawn eating raw meat. Kids' clothes and bodies were very dirty, and they were just devouring the meat they had in their hands. I woke up feeling weird but didn't say anything. I went to the lawn to get some fresh air and saw that there was a trash bag there. I didn't give it much thought and went to the main lounge to eat breakfast. As I was eating, my mother came to me looking a bit uncomfortable and told me that when she woke up for Fajr, she found a cluster of meat in our lawn. Like take bunch of meat and press it tightly together. That's when I told her about my dream and both of us were just speechless. The post is getting too long. Otherwise I have a lot more stories to tell, as I lived in that house for 13 years before moving to another city. The spirits aren't done yet. Hit that subscribe button for more ghostly tales.